Okay, you guys, the topic for today's class is going to be neurotransmission. So to transmit means to send a signal between neurons. So let's focus on the big picture of this, the time when we're actually doing this. Minus the millions of times you're doing it constantly in your brain. Let's look at the reflex arc from yesterday. So we need to send a brain signal, which is action potential, which is just basically electricity, but a little bit different for biology. We need to send an electrical signal from the stimulus all the way to the muscle to cause the response. But the challenge is that the neurons can't touch each other. And there are many different synapses that need to be jumped in order to send that. So we're going to learn today about how you send an electrical signal between neurons to get to the desired place, using chemicals called neurotransmitters. Okay, so let's see. Let's start with step one. I'm going to draw my axon terminal here. And I'm going to draw my dendrite here, like that. Okay, so I need to transfer it from A to B. So let's go ahead and fill our axon terminal with synaptic vesicles, which are just little bubbles that hold in neurotransmitter. In this case, my neurotransmitter is going to be purple. So I'm going to put my purple chemical called neurotransmitter inside of that vesicle. Okay, so at this point, this neuron right here is going to be the one that is on. The goal is to turn on this neuron. So this is going to be my sending neuron. This is going to be my receiving neuron. Okay, and what's going to communicate is my neurotransmitter right there. Okay, so let's see. The first step is that we are going to have action potential or electricity on your sending neuron. So this right here is going to be my sending neuron. And this right here is going to be my receiving neuron. Remember, this is happening within milliseconds. All right. So my first step is that I'm going to have my action potential, which I'm going to make into a lightning bolt. This orange color is important. And in fact, I do want you, if possible, to find another color, because color is going to represent the transfer of energy. In this case, it's going to be electricity, then it's going to transfer to movement energy, etc. So this is just going to represent energy. So this right here, this lightning bolt is going to represent action potential. And as we talked in the notes from class, that is biological energy. Okay, so step one, you have an action potential. We're going to label this AP just for short. You have action potential on the sending neuron, which you can call presynaptic, but sending makes more sense. So I'm going to take my action potential like that, and I'm going to put a lightning bolt on there. Okay, so my action potential is going to buzz down my axon, and remember, it's held in place by myelin sheath, but we're not going into that type of detail here. So once it reaches the axon terminal, it has to be able to push the neurotransmitter into the synapse. That's the goal, so that can turn on this neuron. So we're going to transfer our energy, and we're going to surround the vesicles. So that's going to be our next step. Okay, so I'm going to draw my axon terminal. I'm going to draw my dendrite over here. I'm going to take my 3 vesicles, put my neurotransmitter inside. All right, feel free to pause this for speed. And I'm going to transfer my energy to the vesicles. So this energy is going to transfer it to the vesicles, and that's going to cause them to run in to the end of the axon terminal and push their neurotransmitter into the synapse. All right, so action potential energy is transferred to synaptic vesicles. Okay. And then this is going to cause, so we're going to put causing the neurotransmitter, I'm going to abbreviate, to be pushed into the synapse. That is exactly where we want it. Remember, sometimes they call synaptic cleft. It is just simply the gap between neurons. Remember, these are traveling incredibly quickly. All right. So now we have our neurotransmitter in our synapse. Now we need to focus on the receiving neuron here. This is going to be the new star of the show. So I'm going to introduce a new concept called receptors. So I am going to add receptors to my dendrite. I'll do that over here. So we'll just keep this one gray. This one's going to be dark. It's going to be turned off. It already sent its electrical signal, so it's done doing its job. All right. So on this neuron right here, I'm going to zoom in on it. We are going to add these little things called receptor cups. These are going to be like a lock for a key. The key is the neurotransmitter, and it's going to be almost perfectly shaped to the neurotransmitter that is designed to absorb. So I'm going to take my neurotransmitter and I'm going to put it in the synapse. And because it's traveling so quickly, it's not going to leak out the side, okay? It's going to directly connect to the receptors on the dendrites. So I'm going to put some of these neurotransmitters. They're going to look a little bit larger. That doesn't matter. The dendrites, the receptors, are going to attach a neurotransmitter, okay? So step 3, neurotransmitter, which is going to be NT, attaches to receptors on dendrites of the receiving neuron. Sorry, I gotta zoom out. My bad. Feel free to pause it if you need to continue. All right. So this part to me is like really cool. You're like, okay, well, who cares? You have the neurotransmitters attached to the receptors. And now this. Okay. So we're back. We are actually almost done. This is part 2. So we have the neurotransmitter attaching to their specialized receptors on the receiving neuron. So this right here is going to be the dendrite. So let's focus in on an actual picture of that. Okay, so you've turned it on, but exactly how? So this is going to look complicated, but honestly, it's kind of easier to understand the actual details of it than it is just for taking it at face value. Like, okay, the neurotransmitter attaches, now the receiving neuron is on. So what happens is that on the outside of the dendrite, you have these little doors, but the doors are locked. What the doors do is they allow electricity or ions to flow into the neuron, thus turning the electricity on for the next cell. So what happens is that this neurotransmitter binds, and that can be serotonin, dopamine, and a host of other ones. The neurotransmitter binds to the receptor, and that is the key that unlocks the electricity door. So now the ions are able to flow into the next neuron and turn that neuron on, and it just continues to flow. Okay? So the neurotransmitter attaches to dendrites on the receiving neuron. So now the action potential is transferred to the receiving neuron. And on it goes until it reaches its desired destination. Okay, now, the final step is what happens to neurotransmitters after they've attached to these receptors. And there's 3 things that can happen, okay? So let's see, I'm going to put right here, this is our final step. The used neurotransmitter can do one of 3 things. It can be reabsorbed, it can be dissolved, or it can return to the sending neuron. And we're focusing on this step because it's going to be heavily related to drug use, using the reuptake channel. Drugs are going to block the reuptake channel and keep like dopamine and serotonin in the synapse. So that's why I want to focus on it. So this will be our final picture. We're going to focus on this sending neuron right here. Okay. So the used neurotransmitter can be reabsorbed into the sending neuron. So this was my sending neuron originally. Okay, so I'm going to add into this picture a channel similar to the ones I just showed you over here. It's going to be like a protein channel right there. And my neurotransmitters are going to want to rush inside of this back into the neuron, and then it will be absorbed back into the vesicle until it gets its until it gets an additional action potential and does the job all over again. So these are important, you guys. These are going to be called reuptake channels. If we remember, this is what antidepressants block to keep serotonin inside of the synapse, so that person feels just a general better sense of well-being and happiness about life. And sometimes, you guys, just to make life hard, they call it transporter proteins, but they are the same thing. And this is an important concept because drugs are going to interfere with these uptake channels frequently. Okay, so that is neurotransmission. That is how you send signals from neuron to neuron to neuron.